Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Dell G5 Gaming Desktop. This is a gaming desktop that I think a lot of people are probably buying because it's from a major manufacturer, it's readily available, and it looks, at least on paper, like it doesn't give you a terrible value proposition for the money you're actually spending. But I do want to also look, if you're building a system for the exact same amount of money or a very similar amount of money, what could you put together for that type of money by just putting it all together yourself, and what kind of value adds can you put into the equation to give yourself a little bit more performance, or maybe just swapping things around just a little bit to get very similar performance while actually still getting some benefits like maybe faster storage, more RAM, that sort of thing. So we're going to talk about all those things, comparing a build your own to what I think is probably the very popular Dell G5. Now, before we get started, see those links down below in case you're interested in something like the Dell G5. I'll go ahead and link directly to the page where Dell has the different configurations for this particular gaming desktop, as well as some of the alternative parts that I'm going to talk about today, and some of the swap outs that I would do if I were building a similar system myself. But with that said, let's go ahead and hop on the desktop behind me and get started with looking at the G5 as well as the build your own alternative. So here we are on the Dell G5 sort of page here, and we're going to be looking at this far left model, the sort of entry-level Dell G5 gaming desktop. We're going to be going through some of the specs here, so we're going to go ahead and click customize and buy and see exactly what we're working with. Now, first off, I'm not saying that the Dell G5, the base model, is the best configuration for right now in June of 2020. We're just going to be building a comparison over here on our DIY side, where we are kind of trying to match as closely as possible to the original Dell G5 that we're looking at, while making a couple of modifications that are probably going to give us a little bit more performance for a very similar price. So starting off, the Dell G5 has an i3-9100. Now, while that's not a terrible choice for an entry-level gaming desktop, my problem with the choice of the 9100 here is that it does have an iGPU, whereas something like the 9100F that we're going with on the DIY side here does not have an iGPU, and we're going to save a little bit of money by going with the 9100F. And the reason we can do that, obviously, is because this is a gaming desktop, so we're going to have a dedicated GPU anyways. Now, just a little bit with the housekeeping side on our DIY side, the motherboard I'm going with here has 4 DIMM slots, and the reason I always really try to go with a motherboard with 4 DIMM slots is specifically for a desktop like this, where we're starting with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and we can very easily upgrade that then to 16 gigabytes of RAM later on. So that's why I'm going with this particular motherboard instead of something that could be just a little bit cheaper. So popping down here on the Dell G5 side, we do have that 8 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. We're going with 8 gigabytes over here on the DIY side. We're going with faster RAM, though. We have DDR4 3200 CL16 versus the DDR4 2400 megahertz. So we are going to get a little bit more RAM speed from our DIY side. Dropping down to the hard drive side of things, we have a 1 terabyte, 7200 RPM, 64 megabytes of cache, basically the exact same specs of the Western Digital Caviar Blue over here. Now, jumping back up to the single component that's going to have the biggest impact on gaming, the Dell has an NVIDIA GTX 1660 Super in it, which is exactly what we're throwing in ours as well. We have a GTX 1660 Super, 6 gigabyte card. The difference here is we have an MSI version that has a dual fan design, whereas these Dell OEM cards, I believe this is probably going to be what comes in the Dell G5 here, is just a single fan design. So even though they are both 1660 Supers, it is highly likely the MSI card is going to give you just a little bit more performance, because that core is going to stay a little bit cooler with a better cooler on the graphics card than the Dell version. So it's likely we're actually going to see a little bit better performance from the MSI version than the Dell OEM 1660 Super. Now, on the Dell side of things, we are getting Windows 10 Home here. I would recommend a Windows 10 Pro key for your DIY setup, which you can get anywhere from $5 to $15 pretty easily all day long. In fact, my sponsor for some of my videos, gvgmall.com, has them for about that price as well. So these keys are not hard to get a hold of at an affordable price, so I just went ahead and threw $15 in the budget for a Windows 10 key. Now, the only thing that Dell does have that our DIY setup does not have right now is this Bluetooth / Wi-Fi module, which you can add a USB one or even a PCIe based one in the DIY setup for about $10 to $15. So that's not a huge value add. Obviously, the total down here of $575, if you're throwing an additional $15 for Wi-Fi / Bluetooth, then you can bump that up in your brain to $590. But regardless, we're still coming in well beneath that $680 price. So even if we are adjusting for the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, $590-ish versus $680, that's about a $90 difference that we have to play with in the budget of our DIY setup. Now, the i3-9100F, since we're not using the iGPU over here on the Dell side anyways, that's going to give us pretty much identical gaming performance as the i3-9100. So there's a lot of things that we can do here in our DIY setup to spend an extra $90 while still getting a better overall system. And the first thing I'd recommend doing is swapping out that 300 watt power supply for something more powerful, which, by the way, I think the 300 watt system, or power supply rather, would actually have worked just fine for this computer. The thing is, I just was looking at prices when I was making the list, so I didn't notice that it was only 300 watts. That's a really simple oversight. I just assumed that a Be Quiet unit would be a little bit more powerful. So this Thermaltake Smart 500 watt, 80 plus certified power supply is a good way to go. That is slightly more expensive, so now with the $15 added, we're up to about $595. So we've really spent about $5 extra here on the total system. So we're still in good shape though. We're still working with about $85 here. So now we can start to play with this list a little bit. The first thing you might want to think about doing is doubling your RAM, which you could actually do from the get-go by getting rid of the 2x4 kit and going with a 2x8 kit from the get-go. That'll save you a little bit of money instead of getting two 2x4 kits or just one 4x4 kit. So we could get this 2x8 kit. This would give us 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. So now you'll notice I went ahead and grabbed a Wi-Fi adapter just so it's accounted for in the budget here. So now we're up to $612, still well below that $680. And of course, we are now up to 16 gigabytes of RAM. The next thing that I would recommend doing is adding some storage. And I'm gonna go ahead and recommend an SSD here. This Silicon Power A60 is gonna give us a nice boot drive to get booted from. Here in gaming, it is 256 gigabytes, so you're gonna have plenty of room for Windows and then maybe a couple of your favorite games as well as your most used applications like maybe Google Chrome, maybe Microsoft Office if you're going in that direction. But you can put your most used applications on the SSD, which will give you way faster boot times as well as just a lot more responsiveness from the system while still maintaining an entire 1 terabyte hard drive as a sort of mass storage drive for games, movies, media, whatever else you want to put on there. And we're still only at $650, so we still have about $30 to spend on this system. And I was looking at different prices of GPUs. That's really not enough quite to get us up to a 1660 Ti in most cases. Depending on if you find one on a deal, you might be able to snag one that only increases the total cost of the build to about $680. And that's also not quite enough to jump up to an i5 processor, so you're probably not gonna get a CPU upgrade there. You could drop in a CPU cooler for that cost. That's gonna keep your i3-9100F just as cool as can be. The thing about that though is the 9100F is already not a hot chip to begin with, so I don't know that I'd actually recommend going that route either. To be honest, I'd probably just pocket that extra $30 at this point and just save it for a rainy day, maybe buy a game or two with it. But even with doubling the RAM on this system and adding an SSD boot drive, we're still coming in $30 cheaper than the Dell G5. And that's not to say that Dell G5 is a terrible value. It's just that you can absolutely build a system for cheaper than you can buy one from a big manufacturer. You kind of have to know what you're doing, obviously, and there is a learning curve if you have never done this before, but this is a nearly identical parts list. It's just that we have more RAM and more storage than the Dell G5. So we're gonna see not really much better at all gaming performance because the 1660 Super is gonna perform very similarly to the Dell G5, The thing here is you're gonna just have more RAM to play with, so you're probably a little bit more future-proof, and that storage is gonna mean the games that you put on the SSD are gonna be way faster in load times than the Dell G5, and the operating system itself is also just gonna be a much better experience. And that's along with all the other benefits of building it yourself and knowing exactly how the system was put together. So bringing it all back together here, even though the Dell G5 gaming desktop, at least the entry-level one that we looked at today, is still featuring that 9000 series of Intel chips, there is a really good upgrade path moving forward if you are already on that platform. So if you're somebody that is very uncomfortable with the idea of putting together a gaming PC yourself, and you really don't have interest in learning, you basically just want the machine and you want to get up and running as fast as possible, then yeah, the Dell G5 is a good way of getting into that. They're not charging you a crazy premium for the hardware that they're actually giving you. So you do get good warranty support there, or at least presumably good warranty support from Dell. You do have that peace of mind that everything is all just covered. If something breaks, something doesn't work out of the box, you send it back to Dell. You don't have to worry about contacting different companies like if you're building it yourself or troubleshooting it yourself. You just basically give it back to Dell and let them figure it out and give you a new machine or fix your old machine. Obviously, if you're building it yourself, you do have to deal with some of those things if something does go wrong. That being said, if you are building it yourself, you can get yourself a motherboard that can accept more RAM modules, so you can always upgrade your RAM in the future. You can start off with a really solid power supply that you know is going to be rock solid for years to come. You have storage option flexibility, you have more RAM flexibility, you're saving money, you might get a slightly stronger GPU, and of course, like I mentioned already, the 9100F makes more sense when you're going with a dedicated GPU for a gaming system because you're not using integrated graphics, so saving the money by dropping from the 9100 down to the 9100F, it just makes sense. It's a great way to save some money. Which does effectively mean that if you already know how to build a system yourself or you are interested in learning, you can save a chunk of change by going through the legwork of putting the system together yourself. You know everything that's in it, and at the end of the day, that is gonna actually give you the tools necessary to ever troubleshoot it if it goes wrong or something goes wrong. You know exactly what's in there, you know exactly how it was put together, so you are much better equipped to actually fix your own machine if something does go wrong. But that's basically it from the G5 as well as the build your own alternative. I do want to know your guys' thoughts down below. What would you change about the build your own alternative? Would you give it more storage, more RAM? How would you sort of spend that extra roughly $100 that we're playing with there that we don't have with the Dell G5 to make it a better overall system? Let me know just all your thoughts about the entire video, really, in those comments down below. And of course, if you like the video and you want to see more like it, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment. All those things are very helpful for the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos for my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.